There is a particular kind of exhaustion that has nothing to do with sleep. It is the exhaustion of carrying someone in your mind who is no longer carrying you in theirs. The exhaustion of replaying conversations that ended months ago. Of rehearsing things you'll never say to someone who has already stopped wondering what you'd say. Of waking up tired not because your body didn't rest, but because your mind never stopped working a job it was never paid for. If you know that exhaustion, if you are carrying someone in your head right now who has taken up residence there without your permission and won't seem to leave no matter how many times you ask, then this conversation was built for you. Today we are not talking about forgetting someone. Forgetting is not the goal, and frankly, it's not even possible for anything that mattered. We are talking about something far more powerful and far more achievable, getting them out of your head, out of the obsessive loop, out of the seat of rent-free residence they've occupied, out of the place where they control your peace from a distance, sometimes without even knowing they're doing it. 20 Rules. Rooted in 2,000 years of Stoic philosophy. Built for the very real, very human, very painful experience of trying to let go of someone who won't let go of your mind. Let's begin. Rule 1. Understand that missing someone is not the same as needing them. There was a man named Felix who spent 8 months convinced he couldn't live without his ex-fiancée. Every morning he woke up with her absence as the first thought in his mind. Every evening he scrolled through old photographs, searching for some clue about what he had done wrong, what he could have said differently, what version of events might have kept her in his life. He told everyone who would listen, "I need her. I can't function without her." But here is what Felix discovered, eventually. After a conversation with someone who knew him well enough to challenge him, he wasn't dying. He was eating. He was sleeping, however poorly. He was going to work. He was, in every measurable physical sense, completely capable of surviving without her. What he was experiencing wasn't need. It was missing. And missing, as painful as it is not evidence that you cannot live without someone. It is evidence that you loved them. These are not the same thing, even though they feel identical in the body. The Stoics drew a sharp distinction between what is essential to survival and what is simply painful to lose. Epictetus taught that confusing the two is one of the primary sources of unnecessary suffering in human life. You do not need this person the way you need air or water. You need them the way you need a familiar room you've grown comfortable in, and rooms, however comfortable, can be left. Missing someone is grief doing its work. Needing someone is a story your mind tells to justify staying stuck. Learn to tell the difference, and half the battle is already won. Rule 2. Stop studying them from a distance. There is a peculiar kind of self-harm that looks, from the outside, like simply staying informed. Checking their social media. Asking mutual friends what they've been up to. Driving past places you know they frequent. Searching their name late at night when the house is quiet and your defenses are down. This is not curiosity. This is a wound that keeps reopening itself on purpose. A woman named Adiz did this for nearly a year after a relationship ended. Every notification, every story posted, every photograph, she absorbed it all, told herself she was just checking, and then spent the following hours dissecting what it meant. Was that a new partner in the background of his photo? Did he look happier without her? Was that comment from a woman who meant something? She was not gathering information. She was performing a ritual of self-torture disguised as vigilance. The Stoics had a word for this kind of behavior, prosphados, the fresh, raw wound that never heals because it is reopened daily. Marcus Aurelius understood that the mind has the power to keep a wound perpetually new simply by returning to it, examining it, picking at its edges. You cannot get someone out of your head while you are actively, deliberately, repeatedly inviting them back in. Stop studying them. Unfollow if you must. Mute if unfollowing feels too dramatic. Ask your mutual friends to stop relaying updates. Drive a different route. This is not weakness. This is triage. You are stopping the bleeding before you can expect the wound to close. Rule 3. Release the need for closure. Most people believe they cannot move forward without one final conversation. One explanation. One moment where the other person finally articulates exactly why things ended, takes accountability for their part, and gives you the clean, satisfying narrative that allows you to file the relationship away and move on. I need you to hear something important: that conversation is rarely coming. And even when it does come, it rarely satisfies the way you imagine it will. There was a young man named Tobias who spent 2 years waiting for his father to apologize for years of emotional absence. He held off on healing, actively, consciously, because some part of him believed that healing without the apology would mean letting his father off the hook. The apology never came. And one day, in a moment of unexpected clarity, Tobias realized something that changed the entire trajectory of his healing. He had been waiting for someone else to grant him permission to be at peace. He didn't need the apology. He needed to stop waiting for it. The Stoics taught relentlessly about the danger of placing your peace in the hands of things outside your control. Other people's willingness to explain themselves, to apologize, to provide the tidy narrative you're seeking, none of that is within your control. What is within your control is the decision to construct your own closure, internally, without their participation. Write the letter you'll never send. Have the conversation in your own mind, completely, honestly, and then close the book yourself. You do not need their permission to be free of them. Rule 4. Recognize that your mind is not your enemy, it's confused. When someone won't leave your thoughts, it is easy to feel betrayed by your own mind. Why can't I just stop thinking about this? What is wrong with me? Nothing is wrong with you. Your mind is doing exactly what minds are built to do with unresolved threats and unresolved attachments. It keeps returning to them, trying to solve them, trying to make sense of an experience that hasn't been fully processed. Think of your mind like a search engine that's been given an incomplete query. It keeps running the search, again and again, because it hasn't received a result that satisfies the original question. What happened? Why did it end? What does it mean about me? Could it have gone differently? Until those questions receive some kind of resolution, even a resolution you construct yourself, your mind will keep running the search. This is not malfunction. This is a brain trying to protect you by understanding a painful experience well enough that it doesn't happen again. The Stoic response is not to fight the mind for doing this. It's to give it what it's looking for, deliberately, consciously, so it can stop searching. Sit down. Write out, honestly, what happened. Why it likely ended. What it taught you. What you would do differently. Give your mind the resolution it's been desperately seeking, instead of leaving it to loop endlessly on an unanswered question. A search that returns a result, stop searching. Rule 5. Detach the person from the feeling they gave you. Here is something almost nobody tells you about heartbreak. Often, what you miss isn't the person. It's the feeling. The feeling of being chosen. The feeling of being interesting to someone. The feeling of having somewhere to direct your evenings, your thoughts, your plans. The feeling of matching to another human being in a specific, particular way. A woman named Renata spent months mourning a relationship that, by her own admission, hadn't even been particularly good. The man wasn't kind to her consistently. He wasn't reliable. He didn't make her a priority. And yet she couldn't stop thinking about him. When she finally examined it honestly, with the help of a therapist, she realized, she wasn't missing him. She was missing the version of herself that existed when she was in that relationship, interesting, desired, important to someone. That feeling can be found again. Not through him. Through your own life, rebuilt deliberately, around things and people that generate that same sense of matching, without requiring his presence to produce it. The Stoics taught that confusing the source of a feeling is one of the great errors of human judgment. You think the feeling belongs to the person. It doesn't. It belongs to you. It was always generated inside you, by your own perception of being valued. And what was generated inside you once can be generated again. Separate the person from the feeling, and you will discover something liberating. The feeling was never theirs to give. It was always yours to create. Rule 6. Understand the difference between love and familiarity. The brain does not distinguish well between love and habit. This is one of the cruelest tricks of human psychology. If you spent 2 years, 3 years, 5 years, speaking to someone every day, sharing routines with them, building a world that included their presence as a fixed point, your nervous system has come to associate their presence with safety. Not because they were necessarily safe, but because they were familiar. Familiarity feels like love. It mimics it almost perfectly. The comfort of routine, the predictability of patterns, the absence of the unknown, all of this registers in the nervous system as something resembling affection, even when the relationship itself was unhealthy or unsatisfying. A man named Alumide stayed in contact with an ex-girlfriend for years after their breakup, not because he loved her, he eventually realized, but because the rhythm of texting her good morning had become so deeply grooved into his daily pattern that breaking it felt like losing a limb. It wasn't love keeping him attached. It was neural pathway. Habit. The brain's stubborn preference for the familiar over the unknown, regardless of whether the familiar thing was actually good for him. The Stoics would tell you, examine your attachments honestly. Ask yourself, without flinching, do I miss who they actually were, or do I miss the shape of the routine they occupied? Often, it is the second. And routines, however comfortable, can be rebuilt around something new. Rule 7. Stop negotiating with ghosts. There is a specific kind of mental activity that keeps people stuck for years, the imaginary argument. The rehearsed speech. The conversation you have with someone who isn't there, explaining yourself, defending yourself, finally saying the perfect thing that will make them understand. This happens entirely in your head. They are not present for it. They will never hear it. And yet you run this imaginary courtroom session again and again, presenting your case to a jury that doesn't exist, seeking a verdict that will never be handed down. A woman named Bianca described this perfectly in a conversation I once had. I've had more arguments with him in my head since the breakup than I ever had with him when we were together. This is negotiating with a ghost. And ghosts, by definition, cannot be reasoned with, persuaded, or won over, because they aren't actually there to receive your argument. You are spending real, finite emotional energy on an opponent who exists only in your imagination. The Stoics were deeply practical about where energy should be spent. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself constantly that energy spent on things outside your control, including controlling how someone else perceives you, even imaginatively, is energy wasted. The next time you catch yourself rehearsing the speech, mid-sentence, in the shower or the car, stop. Out loud if you have to. Say, this conversation will never happen. I am done negotiating with a ghost. And redirect that energy towards something real. Something that's actually in the room with you. Rule 8. Accept that their absence is information. When someone leaves, or when you leave them, or when a relationship simply ends, there is often a temptation to treat the ending as a mystery requiring further investigation. As if the right answer is hidden somewhere, waiting to be found, if only you think about it hard enough. But often, the ending itself is the answer. A man named Desmond spent over a year trying to understand why a woman he dated for 6 months had suddenly stopped responding to his messages. He created elaborate theories. Maybe she was scared of commitment. Maybe something happened in her family. Maybe he had said something that offended her without realizing it. What Desmond struggled to accept was simpler and harder than any of his theories. She left because she didn't want to be there anymore. That was the whole explanation. There didn't need to be a deeper mystery, because the absence itself was the information. The Stoics taught a discipline of accepting reality as it presents itself, rather than constructing elaborate alternate narratives that are easier to live with than the truth. Epictetus called this living according to nature, accepting what is, rather than insisting on what you wish were true. Someone's absence, their silence, their choice to stop showing up, this is not a puzzle. It is an answer, delivered in the clearest language available, action. Stop searching for hidden meaning in someone who has already told you everything you need to know through what they did. Rule 9. reclaim the hours you gave them. Heartbreak leaves behind more than emotional residue. It leaves behind time, specific, measurable hours that used to be filled with someone's presence and are now simply empty. The evening phone calls. The weekend plans. The mental space you used to spend thinking about what to get them, how to make them laugh, how their day had gone. All of that time still exists. It hasn't disappeared along with the relationship. It has simply gone unclaimed, sitting open in your schedule like a room nobody has moved into yet. A woman named Patience found herself, 3 months after a breakup, still instinctively reaching for her phone every evening at the time she used to call her boyfriend, only to remember, with a fresh stab of grief each time, that there was no one to call. What changed things for her wasn't waiting for the instinct to fade on its own. It was deliberately filling that hour with something else. A pottery class, at first, simply to have somewhere to be. Eventually, that hour belonged to pottery the way it had once belonged to him. The Stoics understood that a vacuum left unaddressed will often be filled by grief itself, simply because grief is what's available. But you have the power to fill that space deliberately, with something that serves your growth rather than your sorrow. Reclaim the hours. Not eventually. Starting tonight. Rule 10, remember that you survived every version of yourself before this one. This rule is simple, but it deserves to be said plainly. You have been through hard things before, and you are still here. Whatever this person represented, however significant the loss feels right now, you existed as a complete, whole, capable human being before they entered your life. You had thoughts, dreams, friendships, accomplishments, and a fully formed identity that did not depend on their presence to exist. That person you were, the one who existed before this relationship, did not vanish when the relationship began. They are still there, underneath the grief, waiting to be reintroduced to a life that no longer requires someone else's involvement to feel complete. The Stoics taught that the self is the one constant across every circumstance life presents. People come, people go, fortunes change, relationships end, but the self that observes all of this, that has the capacity to choose its response to all of this, remains. You are not starting from zero. You are returning to someone you already know. We are halfway through the 20 rules, and already, something should be shifting in how you're thinking about this person, this attachment, this loop your mind has been stuck in. You made it through the first 10 rules. And if you're honest with yourself, something has probably already started to loosen. Not completely. Not all at once, healing rarely works that way, no matter how much we wish it did. But something. A slight shift in how heavy the thought of them feels when it crosses your mind. A small crack of daylight in a room that's been dark for a while. Now we go further. The next 10 rules are where understanding turns into practice, where insight becomes the daily, deliberate architecture of a mind that no longer belongs to someone who left it. Let's continue. Rule 11, build a boundary around your own mind. Most people think of boundaries as something you set with other people. Don't call me after 10. Don't bring up that subject. Don't show up uninvited. But the most important boundary you will ever build is the one you set with your own thoughts. A man named Kwame described it perfectly during a conversation about his recovery from a difficult breakup. He said, "I used to let myself think about her for as long as the thought wanted to stay. Now I give the thought 5 minutes, and then I tell it the visit is over." This sounds almost absurd when you first hear it, the idea of setting a boundary with your own mind, as if your thoughts were a guest who had overstayed their welcome. But this is precisely the discipline the Stoics practiced, and precisely the discipline that creates freedom. Epictetus taught that we are not responsible for the thoughts that arrive uninvited. The brain generates thoughts constantly, many of them unwanted. But we are entirely responsible for what we do with a thought once it has arrived. Whether we feed it, entertain it, invite it to stay for hours, or whether we notice it, acknowledge it, and gently, firmly, redirect our attention elsewhere. The next time the thought of them arrives, and it will, do not fight it, and do not panic. Simply say, internally, "I see you." 5 minutes. Then we're done. And mean it. Rule 12, stop performing indifference and start practicing it. There is a significant difference between pretending you don't care and actually arriving at a place where you don't carry the weight of caring anymore. A lot of people, in the early stages of letting go, perform indifference. They post confidently on social media. They tell mutual friends they're totally fine. They project an image of someone who has moved on completely, while privately, the moment they're alone, the grief and obsession return in full force. This performance is exhausting, and worse, it actually delays real healing, because it substitutes the appearance of peace for the actual work of building peace. A woman named Florence spent the first 4 months after her divorce telling everyone, loudly and often, how great she was doing. It wasn't until a close friend gently pointed out the disconnect between what she was saying and how she looked, exhausted, brittle, quick to tears at unexpected moments, that Florence admitted she had been performing for an audience instead of healing for herself. The Stoics had no use for performance. Marcus Aurelius wrote his Meditations as a private journal, never intended for public display, because the real work of philosophy, he understood, happens in the unwatched moments, not the ones curated for an audience. Stop performing your healing for the people watching. Do the quiet, unglamorous, often invisible work instead. Real indifference, the kind rooted in actual inner peace, doesn't need an audience to validate it. Rule 13, identify what you outsource to them. When a significant relationship ends, people often discover, painfully, that they had quietly outsourced parts of their identity to the other person without realizing it. Maybe you outsourced your sense of being interesting. Maybe you outsourced your sense of being desirable, capable, funny, worthy of attention. Maybe you outsourced your decision-making, your social calendar, your daily structure, your sense of purpose. A man named Augustine realized, 6 months after his long-term relationship ended, that he hadn't made a single significant decision on his own in years. What to eat, where to go on vacation, how to spend a Saturday, all of it had been built around his partner's preferences, to the point that Augustine genuinely didn't know what he wanted anymore, separate from what she had wanted. This is one of the most disorienting parts of heartbreak, not just losing the person, but losing access to parts of yourself you didn't realize you had handed over. The Stoic path forward requires an honest inventory. Sit down and ask yourself plainly, what did I let this person hold for me? My confidence. My sense of direction. My identity as someone interesting or worthy. Once you've named what was outsourced, you can begin the deliberate work of reclaiming it, piece by piece, decision by decision, until those things belong to you again, independent of anyone else's involvement. Rule 14, let your body catch up to your mind. Sometimes your mind decides to let go long before your body does. This is one of the more frustrating realities of emotional detachment. You can intellectually understand that the relationship is over, that moving on is the right choice, that the person is not coming back, and your body will still respond as if none of that information has reached it. The racing heart when their name appears on your phone. The physical ache in your chest at certain songs. The way your stomach drops when you see someone who looks like them from behind. A woman named Ngozi described this disconnect with remarkable clarity. My mind moved on in March. My body didn't get the memo until August. This is not failure. This is neurobiology. Attachment creates real, physical changes in the nervous system, patterns of anticipation, comfort, and safety that were built over months or years and that do not dissolve simply because you've decided, intellectually, to move forward. The Stoics were not dismissive of the body's role in emotional experience. They understood that the mind and body are deeply intertwined, and that genuine transformation requires patience with both. Give your body time. Exercise to discharge the physical residue of stress and longing. Breathe deliberately when the physical wave hits. Don't punish yourself for a racing heart that hasn't yet received the update your mind already processed. Your body will catch up. Bodies always do, eventually, when given consistent, patient evidence that the old patterns are no longer needed. Rule 15, refuse to compete with a memory. One of the cruelest tricks the mind plays during heartbreak is editing. Memory is not a video recording. It is a reconstruction, rebuilt slightly differently every time you access it, and during periods of longing, the mind has a powerful tendency to edit out the difficult parts and amplify the good ones. The arguments fade. The incompatibilities blur. What remains, increasingly, is a highlight reel, the best moments, polished and replayed until they feel like the entire relationship. A man named Ruben spent months mourning a relationship that he eventually had to admit, with brutal honesty, had been genuinely difficult for most of its duration. But his memory had quietly filtered out the difficulty and left him grieving a version of the relationship that had barely existed, a highlight reel mistaken for the whole film. You cannot compete with a memory, because a memory has the unfair advantage of being curated. It will always look better than the complicated, imperfect reality of an actual current relationship, an actual current version of yourself working towards something real. The Stoic discipline here is honesty. Write down, in detail, the difficult parts. The arguments. The incompatibilities. The moments that hurt. Keep this record somewhere you can return to whenever the highlight reel starts playing, to remind yourself, this is not the whole story. This was never the whole story. Rule 16, practice the discipline of the present moment. Obsessive thinking about someone almost always involves time travel. You are either replaying the past, what was said, what was done, what could have gone differently, or projecting into a future that doesn't exist, imagining scenarios where they come back, where they realize what they lost, where the story resolves the way you want it to. Almost none of this obsessive energy is spent in the actual present moment. Marcus Aurelius wrote about this directly, reminding himself that the only time that actually exists, the only time we can act within, is now. The past is gone and unchangeable. The future is imagined and uncertain. The present is the only reality available to us, and yet it is the place our minds visit least often during periods of heartbreak. A woman named Kayamika began practicing a simple discipline whenever she noticed her mind drifting into the past or future with thoughts of her ex. She would name 5 things she could see, 4 things she could hear, 3 things she could physically feel. A simple grounding exercise that forced her attention back into the only place healing can actually happen, the present. The present moment does not contain heartbreak. Heartbreak lives in memory and imagination. The present moment, examined honestly, is usually just this. Right now. Breathing. Existing. Safe. Return to it, again and again, every time your mind tries to drag you elsewhere. Rule 17, find the lesson without demanding it justify the pain. There is a difference between finding meaning in painful experience and forcing yourself to believe the pain was somehow worth it or necessary. You do not have to conclude that everything happens for a reason. You do not have to believe that this heartbreak was some cosmic gift in disguise, perfectly designed for your growth. That kind of forced meaning-making can feel hollow, even dishonest, particularly in the rawest stages of grief. What you can do, what the Stoics consistently practiced, is extract whatever genuine lesson is available without insisting the lesson retroactively justifies the suffering. A man named Patrick learned, through a painful relationship, that he had a pattern of choosing partners who mirrored his mother's emotional unavailability. That lesson was real, valuable, and would serve him for the rest of his life. But Patrick never needed to convince himself that the relationship had been worth the pain it caused in order to benefit from what it taught him. The lesson and the suffering can both be true at the same time, without one needing to redeem the other. Take what serves you. Leave the rest. You don't owe the experience gratitude in order to grow from it. Rule 18, stop waiting for the feeling to disappear before you act like it already has. This rule will sound counterintuitive, but it is one of the most practically powerful tools available to you. Most people wait to feel ready before they act differently. They wait to stop missing someone before they stop checking their phone for messages. They wait to feel confident before they start rebuilding their social life. They wait for the emotional shift to happen first, and only then do they plan to change their behavior. This gets the order backwards. The Stoics, and modern behavioral psychology, centuries later, would confirm this, understood that action often precedes feeling, not the other way around. You do not wait to feel brave before doing something difficult. You act with discipline, and the feeling of capability follows the action, not before it. A woman named Yatun forced herself to go through the motions of a life unattached to her ex long before she actually felt unattached. She made plans. She showed up to things, even when she didn't feel like it. She acted, deliberately and consistently, like someone who had already moved forward, long before her emotions had caught up to that reality. Eventually, they did catch up. Because the actions created the feeling, not the reverse. Stop waiting to feel ready. Act like the version of you who has already let go, and watch that version slowly, steadily, become real. Rule 19, understand that detachment is not the absence of love, it is the presence of wisdom. There is a common fear that letting go of someone, achieving real emotional detachment, means you didn't love them enough, or that the love wasn't real to begin with. This is one of the great misunderstandings about Stoic philosophy, and it deserves to be corrected directly. The Stoics never taught the absence of love. They taught the wisdom to hold love without being destroyed by its loss. Detachment, in the Stoic sense, is not coldness. It is the recognition that loving someone fully does not require your peace to remain hostage to whether they stay or go. You can have loved someone with your whole heart, and still arrive at a place where their absence no longer controls your inner state. These two truths are not in conflict. In fact, the second one is often only possible because the first one was real. The deepest, most mature form of love, the Stoic philosophers would argue, is love that does not require possession or permanence to remain meaningful. You loved them. That love was real. And now, with wisdom, you are learning to hold the memory of that love without letting it dictate your present. This is not the opposite of love. This is what love looks like when it has finally grown up. Rule 20, become someone worth returning to, for yourself. The final rule is, in many ways, the most important. Throughout this process of letting go, there is a temptation to imagine your transformation as something performed for them, proof of how much better you've become, evidence designed, consciously or not, for an audience of one. Some part of the mind whispers, imagine how they'll feel when they see how far I've come. Release this. Completely. The version of you being rebuilt right now, calmer, more grounded, more emotionally sovereign, more deeply rooted in your own sense of self, is not being built for them to witness. It is being built because you deserve to live inside a peaceful, well-tended mind regardless of whether they ever see the result. A woman named Esperanza, years after a painful divorce, was asked whether she ever imagined her ex-husband seeing the life she had built. She said something simple that has stayed with me ever since, I stopped building for an audience. I started building a home I actually wanted to live in. That is the final shift. Not transformation as proof. Transformation as homecoming. You are not becoming this version of yourself to win something back, or to prove a point, or to be missed. You are becoming this version of yourself because it is who you were always capable of being, and because the only person who has to live inside your mind, every single day, for the rest of your life, is you. Make it a home worth living in. Closing. 20 rules. 2,000 years of philosophy. One simple, demanding, achievable goal, getting someone out of your head, and finding, in the space they leave behind, the quiet, sovereign peace that was always yours to reclaim. This work is not easy. Nobody walks through heartbreak gracefully on the first attempt. There will be days these rules feel impossible to practice, and that is part of being human. But each time you return to them, each time you choose the pause over the reaction, the present moment over the replay, the boundary over the obsession, you are building something that cannot be taken from you again. If this conversation gave language to something you've been carrying, if it helped loosen, even slightly, the grip of someone who has been living in your mind longer than they deserve, then I want you to know this is exactly the kind of work the Stoic path was built for. Every week, we come here to have the honest conversations, the ones that don't offer empty comfort, but real philosophical tools for actually living better. If that's what you're looking for, subscribe to the Stoic Path right now. Turn on your notifications. Because this is just one conversation in a library built to help you think clearly, feel fully, and live with the kind of grounded, unshakable peace that most people spend a lifetime searching for. Share this with someone who needs to hear it. Someone who is still carrying someone they need to put down. Someone who has been waiting for permission to finally, fully let go. Send it to them. This is the Stoic path. And the peace you've been looking for, it was never theirs to control.